Right, this is just a wee diversion from the normal pattern. We're just going to look at one verse. It's not particularly spiritually uplifting. And you'll see why we're doing this in a moment. It's just a wee conundrum. Textual Conundrum. And as the title of this little talk shows, I actually think the message gives the best answer. Now, if you don't know me that well at all, you'll say, well, so what? If you do know me, you'll know that very often when I'm preaching, I will make some disparaging remark about the message, telling you that it's not a translation, which is right, which I believe is absolutely right. But sometimes it does get things right. Now, I actually don't hate the message. It's a misuse of the message which I hate. But anyway, what's this all about? Well, let's go 1 Samuel 30. It's all about 1 Samuel 13, chapter 13, verse 1. So let's first of all read what it says in the NIV. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel for 42 years. Well, that all seems fairly straightforward. And if you look at the rest of 1 Samuel, and it all seems pretty consistent with what else you learn about Saul from that book. However, if you've got the NIV, you'll see it's got some footnotes in. And you look at them and it says, it's referring to the Septuagint. Telling you the Hebrew does not have 30 in it, nor 40 for that matter. And it's got some promo reading of the Hebrew text. So, where do we go? What's going on? Is it just, if you look at those things, so what, who cares? Well, look at the ESV, not the UK translation. I'll come on to why in a minute. And there it says this: Saul lived for 1 year, and then became king, and when he'd reigned for 2 years over Israel, well, that reads a bit different, doesn't it? And the King James Version and the New King James Version, one or two others as well, give a very similar translation. And then let's read what the RSV says. Saul was ... years old when he began to reign, and he reigned ... and 2 years over Israel. What the heck's going on here? But what is going on? Well, the ESV type translations are following fairly literally what the original Hebrew manuscripts say. Well, it's not the original ones, we haven't got the original ones, but what the Hebrew manuscripts say. And if you read that, it really doesn't make that much sense. It all seems to imply that Saul was a year old when he became king, which is clearly nonsense. What they have done, the ESV types, it doesn't mean he was just 1 year old. It meant he lived for 1 year since some events have probably just been referred to in 1 Samuel. And then further 2 years later, he does what it tells you he did in 13:2, where he starts to collect an army together. What the NIV and others have done, and things like the NASB and the HCSB, which is the Holman Christian Standard Bible, also the New Living Translation, which some people don't have much respect for, but it's perfectly reasonable to take it as it is. What they've done is say, well, they're following what the Septuagint, or the Greek translation of the Old Testament says. And it's also more consistent with Acts 13:21. I think it's 13:20. Yes, Acts 13:21. And they've assumed that it's telling you, it was normal to talk about it, but Old Testament talks about the king, it tells you how old he was when he became king and how long he reigned for. I said, right, that's what it must be meaning to do here. And then I said, what is probably the best solution is the message. It says, Saul was a young man when he began as king. He was king over Israel for many years. Well, there you go. And that actually sums up what we know. No one actually knows what this verse is meant to say. They're all making assumptions that the ESV line or the NIV type line, they're perfectly reasonable assumptions. Well, we don't know if they're right or not. the truth of the matter is nobody knows exactly what this verse says. And the Message translation says probably the best, as it's assuming we don't know exactly what it says, so it gives a rough translation. He was a young man, who knows how old he was, and he reigned for a number of years. Job done. So I say this is not spiritually uplifting. Just if you know me and what I normally say about the Message, you might be slightly amused by this, and it gives you some insight that there are some places in the Bible where, not many, there's one or two places where we're really not absolutely sure about what it says. And the difference in translation, also it's interesting, the ESV, who went along with the ESV? The King James Version and the New King James Version. Now the ESV and the New King James Versions are based on different, particularly the New Testament, on different textual streams. I'm probably not the right word for it, but anyway. But the ESV is based on the same set for the New Testament, the same set as the NIV. So the ESV and the King James Version are going together. But it's just that there are one or two places where we really don't know exactly what the Bible says. Now, there aren't many of them. People say, well, we don't know what the Bible says. They're talking rubbish. It's something like 99+% of the Bible. We are, as near as possible, 100% certain of what it says. People say, oh, there's all sorts of doubts. No, there aren't all sorts of doubts. There's one or two minor doubts. And if you look at this verse 13, 1 Samuel 13:1, the whole of Christian theology does not depend on 1 Samuel 13:1. But anyway, we'll be back to Deuteronomy in this stream of videos before long, so I hope you'll be more fruitful.